The text message arrived at 2:47 p.m. while I was standing on stage at the Global Innovation Summit in Singapore, presenting our company's breakthrough AI platform to an audience of 800 tech executives from across Asia Pacific. Your services are no longer required. Don't bother coming back. The message was from Stephen Walsh, my boss at TechFlow Dynamics, a Seattle-based software consulting firm where I'd worked as Director of Asia Pacific Operations for 7 years. 7 years of building relationships, securing contracts, and generating over $85 million in revenue for the company. The irony was perfect. Stephen had just fired me via text message while I was literally on stage representing TechFlow at the most important technology conference in Asia. My name is David Chen. I'm 42 years old, and I had just been terminated in the most unprofessional way possible while delivering a presentation that would soon generate the largest contract in our company's history. The presentation was going perfectly. I was explaining how our AI optimization platform had helped 3 major manufacturing companies in Thailand reduce operational costs by 40%. The audience was engaged, asking technical questions, and I could see several executives taking notes. In the front row sat Hiroshi Nakamura, CTO of Yamamoto Industries, Japan's largest electronics manufacturer. We'd been in negotiations for months about a potential $50 million 5-year implementation contract. But now, staring at Stephen's text message on my phone while trying to maintain my composure on stage, everything felt surreal. The second message appeared immediately. This is effective immediately. Security will handle your office tomorrow. I finished my presentation flawlessly, answered questions from the audience, and walked off stage with a smile. Nobody in that room knew that I'd just been fired while representing the company that had just discarded me like yesterday's news. The timing couldn't have been more calculated or more stupid. Stephen had waited until I was 8,000 miles away, presenting at a conference he'd insisted I attend, to destroy my career via text message. What he didn't realize was that he'd just made the biggest mistake of his professional life. I joined TechFlow Dynamics 7 years ago when they were desperate to expand into Asian markets. Stephen Walsh had hired me specifically because of my background, MIT computer science degree, 5 years at Oracle's Singapore office, and fluency in Mandarin, Japanese, and Korean. My job was to build TechFlow's presence in Asia from scratch. The Asian market is the future, Stephen had told me during my interview. We need someone who understands both the technology and the culture. Build us an empire over there. For 7 years, that's exactly what I did. I opened our Singapore office, hired a team of 15 local engineers, and systematically built relationships with technology executives across 12 countries. The results spoke for themselves. TechFlow's Asia-Pacific division now generated 45% of the company's total revenue, up from 0 when I started. But Stephen Walsh was the type of executive who took credit for every success while distancing himself from any challenge. When our first major client in Thailand initially rejected our proposal, Stephen publicly blamed my cultural misunderstanding of their requirements. When I eventually won them back with a revised approach that saved them $12 million annually, Stephen told the board it was his strategic oversight that made the difference. The warning signs had been accumulating for months. Stephen stopped including me in quarterly planning meetings. He hired his former college roommate Brad Morrison as Associate Director of International Strategy without consulting me. Brad had never worked outside the United States and spoke only English, but he was Stephen's drinking buddy from their fraternity days. 2 months ago, I discovered that Stephen had been taking client calls that should have gone through me. When I confronted him about it, he said he was streamlining international communications and that I shouldn't worry about decisions above my pay grade. My wife Jennifer had noticed the changes in my stress levels. "He's positioning you for something," she'd said after I told her about Brad's hiring. "Executives like that don't bring in their friends unless they're planning to push someone out." I dismissed her concerns. After 7 years of generating massive revenue and building TechFlow's entire Asian operation, I thought my position was secure. I had relationships with clients that would be impossible to replace quickly. I had institutional knowledge about Asian markets that Stephen desperately needed. I was wrong. What I didn't know was that Brad had been systematically working to undermine my client relationships for months. He'd convinced Stephen that I was going native and prioritizing Asian client interests over company profits. He suggested that my frequent travel was excessive and that most international operations could be managed remotely from Seattle. The Singapore conference was supposed to be the crown jewel of my career at TechFlow. Stephen had personally approved my attendance and presentation, praising my work in front of the entire leadership team. "David's going to show those Asian executives what American innovation looks like," he'd said during our last team meeting. Instead, he'd used my absence from the country to execute my termination while ensuring I couldn't defend myself or speak to clients before word spread through the industry. But Stephen had made one critical miscalculation. He'd fired me while I was sitting in a room with every major technology executive in Asia Pacific, including several who were about to become very interested in what I had to offer. After my presentation, I walked to the hotel bar and ordered a whiskey. The conference was continuing, but I needed time to process what had just happened. 20 minutes later, Hiroshi Nakamura approached my table. "David-san, excellent presentation today. Very impressive results from the Thailand implementation." "Thank you, Nakamura-san. I appreciate your attendance." He sat down without being invited, which was unusual for someone of his formal business style. "I must ask, is everything satisfactory with your company? You seemed distracted during the question period." I made a decision that would change everything. I showed him Stephen's text messages. Hiroshi read them twice, his expression growing more serious with each word. In Japanese business culture, firing someone via text message was not just unprofessional, it was deeply insulting and reflected poorly on the entire organization. "This is very unfortunate timing," he said finally. "We were prepared to move forward with the Yamamoto Industries contract next week." "That's still possible," I replied carefully. "TechFlow has excellent technical capabilities." Hiroshi shook his head. "TechFlow has you. Without your oversight and cultural understanding, we cannot risk such a significant investment." He stood up and handed me his business card, not the standard card he gave to vendors, but his personal card with his direct phone number. "David-san, when you determine your next professional path, please contact me immediately. Yamamoto Industries has significant technology consulting needs, and we prefer working with individuals we trust, rather than companies that treat valued employees as disposable." That evening, I called Jennifer from my hotel room and explained what had happened. Her response was immediate and characteristic. "Good, now you can build something for yourself instead of making Stephen Walsh rich." By Monday morning, I was on a plane back to Seattle with a business plan forming in my mind. Stephen thought he could simply inherit my client relationships by firing me and installing Brad Morrison. He was about to learn that 7 years of trust and cultural understanding couldn't be transferred via corporate memo. I landed at SeaTac Airport on Tuesday morning and drove directly to TechFlow's offices, not to beg for my job back, but to collect my personal belongings and observe the chaos that was about to unfold. Stephen was waiting in the conference room with Brad and our HR director, Lisa Parker. "David," Stephen said as I entered, his tone artificially cheerful. "How was Singapore?" "Educational," I replied, taking a seat across from him. Lisa slid a termination packet across the table. Standard severance, non-compete agreements, return of company property. The package was legally adequate, but deliberately minimal. "I think you'll find everything in order," Stephen said. "We've decided to restructure the Asia-Pacific division under Brad's leadership. Your services are no longer required." Brad sat there looking like he'd just won the lottery. He was 34 years old with an MBA from a decent school, but zero international business experience and no understanding of Asian business culture. "What about my client relationships?" I asked. "They're company relationships," Stephen replied. "Brad will be handling all international accounts going forward. I signed the paperwork without argument. Stephen looked surprised by my compliance. I have to say, David, I expected more resistance from you. This is refreshing. No point fighting reality, I said, standing up and shaking his hand. I wish you the best with the Asian markets. What Stephen didn't know was that I'd spent my flight from Singapore making calls, not to clients yet, that would come later, but to lawyers, accountants, and business advisors. I'd also reviewed my employment agreement carefully and confirmed that my non-compete clause only applied to direct competitors in the Pacific Northwest. It said nothing about starting my own consulting firm or working with international companies. I cleaned out my desk while Brad watched from across the office, making a point of sitting at my old workstation and loudly discussing international strategy with anyone who would listen. The performance was pathetic, but I let him have his moment. By Wednesday morning, the real damage began. Hiroshi Nakamura called TechFlow's main office, asking to speak with me about finalizing the $50 million Yamamoto Industries contract. Lisa transferred him to Brad, who spent 20 minutes trying to explain why he was now Hiroshi's primary contact. Hiroshi hung up and immediately called my personal cell phone. "David-san, what is happening at your former company? This young man understands nothing about our requirements or business culture." "There have been management changes," I told him. "I can't discuss specifics right now, but I'll be in touch soon." Similar calls came from clients across Asia that week. Chen Wei from Shanghai Manufacturing was particularly direct. "If you're no longer with TechFlow, we need to discuss our contract immediately. We signed because of your personal guarantee of oversight." Stephen began to panic by Thursday. He called my cell phone 8 times, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails about misunderstandings and rash decisions. Brad had apparently managed to offend 3 clients and completely bungled a video conference with a potential new account in South Korea. The breaking point came Friday morning when Yamamoto Industries sent a formal letter requesting termination of their pending $50 million contract due to material changes in account management and cultural liaison. Stephen showed up at my apartment that evening. "This is ridiculous, David. You're destroying relationships out of spite." "I'm not destroying anything," I said. "I'm simply not available to save you from Brad's incompetence. What do you want? More money? A better title? Your job back?" "I want nothing from you, Stephen. You made your choice in Singapore." He left looking like a man who'd just realized he'd made a catastrophic mistake. But it was too late. The damage was done, and I was just getting started. Saturday morning brought a call from Lisa Parker. She sounded exhausted. "David, I need to ask you something confidentially. Did you know about Brad's hiring before it was announced?" "No." "Why?" "Because I've been reviewing the paperwork, and some things don't add up." Stephen backdated Brad's employment to 6 months ago, but his first day was actually 3 weeks ago, and his salary is 40% higher than yours was. This was new information. I'd assumed Brad's hiring was simple nepotism, but Lisa was suggesting something more calculated. "What else did you find?" "Stephen's been intercepting your client emails for 2 months. He set up a forwarding rule that copied everything to his account, and he's been telling the board that you were planning to quit anyway." The picture became clearer. Stephen hadn't fired me impulsively. He'd been planning this for months, systematically undermining my position while preparing Brad to take over. The Singapore conference wasn't recognition for my achievements. It was a convenient way to get me out of the country while he completed the transition. Lisa continued, "There's more. Stephen's been negotiating with a consulting firm in Tokyo about acquiring our Asia-Pacific client list. He told them you were unreliable and that the company needed professional management of international relationships." Now I understood. Stephen wasn't just replacing me with his drinking buddy. He was planning to sell the Asia-Pacific division to a Japanese firm and cash out while taking credit for the business I'd built. "When is this supposed to happen?" "The preliminary agreement was signed last week. Full transfer is scheduled for next month." Stephen had played this perfectly. fire me, install Brad as a temporary placeholder, then sell the entire operation to the Japanese firm for a significant profit. Brad would probably get a bonus and a recommendation letter, while Stephen would look like a strategic genius who'd successfully monetized the Asian expansion. There was just one problem with his plan: the clients. Asian business culture values personal relationships and continuity above almost everything else. Hiroshi Nakamura wasn't going to accept some random Japanese consulting firm just because Stephen Walsh said it was a good idea. I called Hiroshi that evening. "Nakamura-san, I need to accelerate our timeline. Something significant is happening with TechFlow's Asia-Pacific operations." "What kind of something?" I explained Stephen's plan to sell the division to a Japanese firm. Hiroshi was quiet for a long moment. "That's very interesting, David-san. If he's planning to sell, it means he's already given up on managing those relationships himself. And if the clients are unhappy with the transition, they'll be looking for alternatives." "Exactly. How quickly can you move on our previous discussions?" "I can have legal documents prepared by Monday. Yamamoto Industries would prefer working directly with your new consulting firm rather than through corporate intermediaries." Sunday, I registered Chen Dynamics LLC as a Delaware corporation and opened business banking accounts. By Monday morning, I had a company, a business license, and a client ready to sign a $50 million contract. Stephen thought he was playing chess, but he'd just handed me every piece on the board. Tuesday brought chaos to TechFlow's offices. Yamamoto Industries' legal team sent contract termination notices. Chen Wei from Shanghai Manufacturing requested immediate return of all proprietary documents. The South Korean electronics company cancelled their negotiation meeting. Stephen called me at 9 a.m. "What the hell are you doing, David? I'm working for my own company now. My clients chose to follow me." "You can't do this. You have a non-compete agreement." "I checked with my lawyer. My non-compete applies to direct competitors in the Pacific Northwest. Chen Dynamics is an international consulting firm based in Singapore." The silence lasted almost 30 seconds. "You're destroying the Asia-Pacific division." "No, Stephen. You destroyed it when you fired me via text message while I was representing TechFlow on stage. I'm just helping my clients find better service." Wednesday brought more contract terminations. By Thursday, the Japanese consulting firm was asking serious questions about the value of acquiring an Asia-Pacific division with no clients. Friday morning, Lisa Parker called again. "Stephen's having a complete meltdown. The Japanese deal is falling apart. Brad quit yesterday, and the board is demanding explanations." "What kind of explanations?" "How we lost $127 million in contracted revenue in 1 week. The final blow came exactly 2 weeks after Stephen had fired me in Singapore." Lisa called with news that made everything worthwhile. TechFlow's board just voted Stephen out as regional director. Apparently, losing our entire Asian market was considered a fireable offense. I felt a quiet satisfaction but no joy. Stephen had brought this on himself through arrogance and spectacularly poor judgment. "There's more," Lisa continued. "Brad Morrison is apparently telling people that you sabotaged the Asia-Pacific division out of spite. Some board members are asking questions about his version of events." I'd expected this. Stephen and Brad needed someone to blame for their failure, and I was the obvious target. Let me guess. They're claiming I stole clients illegally. Exactly. But here's what they don't know. I've been documenting everything. Email intercepts, backdated employment records, the attempted sale to the Japanese firm. I'm prepared to testify that Stephen had been planning your termination for months. The irony was perfect. Stephen's methodical planning had created a paper trail that proved his actions were calculated rather than reactive. If he'd simply fired me honestly, he might have retained some clients. Instead, his deception made my departure look completely justified. 6 months later, I was reviewing quarterly reports in my Singapore office when Jennifer called from our new apartment overlooking Marina Bay. "You'll never guess who I ran into at the airport yesterday," she said. "Stephen Walsh. He was flying economy to Portland for some job interview. He looked terrible. I felt no satisfaction from Stephen's downfall. Destroying someone's career brings no lasting peace, even when they deserve it. But I had learned something valuable about loyalty, timing, and the importance of treating people with basic respect. Chen Dynamics had exceeded all expectations. We'd landed 18 major contracts across Asia Pacific and opened offices in Tokyo, Seoul, and Bangkok. The Yamamoto Industries partnership had grown into a relationship spanning 7 countries and multiple industries. Most importantly, I'd built something that was truly mine. No office politics, no credit stealing, no backstabbing colleagues, just excellent work for clients who valued competence and cultural understanding. Jennifer joined me in Singapore permanently that spring. We bought a house in the Botanic Gardens district and started talking about expanding the family. For the first time in years, I felt like I was building something permanent, rather than just surviving someone else's ambitions. The Global Innovation Summit returned to Singapore the following year. This time I attended as CEO of Chen Dynamics, not as a TechFlow employee. I gave the keynote address about building sustainable technology partnerships across cultures. As I stood on the same stage where Stephen had fired me via text message 1 year earlier, I thought about how much my life had changed. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the catalyst for the best thing that could happen. Stephen's text message had set me free, even though that wasn't his intention. His unprofessional, poorly timed termination had given me the motivation and the moral clarity to build something better than what I'd lost. I never thanked him for it, but maybe I should have. After all, without his spectacular lack of judgment, I might still be working for someone else instead of building my own empire. Sometimes the best revenge is simply becoming everything your former boss said you'd never be.